I came into my 3 weeks on the coast intent on taking 3 coaching sessions.
Oh, dude, I have such a bad cut in my leg. Please help. Thank you.
Oh, fuck. But unfortunately, I only had time for one. And I spent that lesson with Darren Butler of Endless Biking. Now, knowing nothing about Darren at the time, something I've since rectified, but still needing to make a decision about who I was going to be taking a lesson with from a sea of different schools and coaches, I chose Darren because he's one of only a handful of PMBIA certified level 4 coaches in the world, which is really just a fancy way of saying he shreds and can explain extremely clearly how he does it. Now, I came to Darren intent on improving my jumping and my technical riding, which is a lot to cover in one 3-hour session. So credit where credit's due, Darren found the most impactful skill at their intersection to address. And of course, it was a skill that I thought I understood and used effectively already, but only had the faintest grasp of. Now, I'm going to assume you know basically how to pump. If you don't, there's lots of good videos out there. Go check out one of those. But I think a lot of those videos are guilty of the same crime, which is oversimplification in the name of helping beginners. They create this image that pumping is one big movement reserved for the backsides of rollers, something where our weight is shifted way over the back wheel to maximize power transfer to gain that explosive speed. And this is true, but it's the equivalent of throwing a haymaker. Sometimes you need to set things up with the jab.
1 and 2. 1 and 2.
And by simply jabbing down through the legs with a short, sharp pump, we're able to generate a much more precise pressure point. Pressure that we can then use in any number of different ways. If we want speed, we can classically generate it on backsides or berms. Wait a minute, was that Jeff Gullovich? Huh. But we can even use it multiple times in a row on sustained declines to build speed.
Okay, coming.
And this idea ended up being massively transformative for how simple it is. The extra speed that I was able to develop as a result of leveraging multiple pumps was legitimately terrifying.
There's spots in there where I am going scary fast, where I'm not able to read the terrain as fast as I'm making decisions about it.
With only a couple jabs, I would be charging faster than I was equipped to handle.
Right there, I bet you're thinking, oh, I'm not going fast enough.
Yeah, 100%. I'm like, right? I basically stood myself up in the corner.
But think about your shift in your mindset of now. All of a sudden, it's like, oh, crap, I'm not going fast enough. I better get after it.
Yeah.
And so now we start being the driver.
So it's great for building speed to help clear jumps, and absolutely amazing for getting after it if I messed up a corner and needed to get back on the gas.
Okay, all of a sudden, now we're just skipping along down the trail.
Yeah. That's a very different feeling experience. That's awesome.
But as much of a game changer as this was for me, I was still in the first round. There was a lot to come. I think we all understand that pumping temporarily increases our weight as it's expressed through our tires on the trail. Well, more weight equals more traction.
You can start to pump in the turns.
Yeah.
And it's going to do two things. One is it's actually going to help you increase your momentum and your speed, which is going to increase your likelihood of being able to make that jump.
Yeah.
But it's also going to improve your traction.
If we want more traction in a corner, pumping can drive the wheels into the ground to help avoid washing out while trying to maintain higher speeds. It can also help us to change the arc of corners by allowing the tires to dig in, cutting a sharper turn. This ends up being where Schwalping and Cuddies come from, though the degree of rear wheel drift is going to depend on weight distribution and the aggression of the steering inputs, but it all is cut from the same cloth. Now, one of the surprise topics of conversation was the use of a flat foot position when pumping corners.
So like you're recommending for like a berm like this, would you say feet level, or is it okay if I drop my outside a bit, or
I'm going to encourage you to do this
just try to do it level
so that you can pump it.
Now, obviously, we can get away with this when there's support, like a berm or a rut. But Darren encouraged me to try this even on flat corners. Now, once I got back home to Edmonton, I started to play with the idea more on our XC track. And did I eat shit? Yep. But I found the limits for the conditions on that day. And while it was a pretty big crash, it ended up being a huge learning experience. So this isn't to say that you can and should always ride with level pedals and pump every flat corner. I despise absolutes, and so does Darren. But the case should be made that exploring how far you can take a particular technique will always yield more gains than restricting its use to only certain scenarios. The end result has been that I'm taking corners faster than I ever have. And while I do still drop my outside foot, I'm getting better at understanding when it's necessary, when it's not, and how much drop is required for a given situation. Now, if pumping can be used to make the bike heavy, it can also be used to make the bike light. The pump creates weight, but as the suspension decompresses, it helps the bike to unweight.
That was awesome.
Making it much easier to pick up over roots or reposition the bike on trail without having to use all of the inputs required for a bunny hop. Now, where I typically would have just hopped, now I'm driving the bike into the ground just before I get to the object I want to unweight over. The result is that the bike, for much less effort and with a much more central body position, can float over rougher sections of trail or be picked up to change lines. Now, I still have so much work to do with this concept. I have to admit that sometimes I feel like I have too many tools that need honing and not enough opportunities to even use them. But this is one of those skills that's so easy to explore on every single ride. I still need to move a bit more fluidly. I still need to play with the dials. There's a lot of area to explore between the heavy haymaker of a bunny hop or huge pump and the jab of just a quick movement through the legs. Even this jab can be used in degrees, and I often find that I just pump as hard as I can all the time when really learning to dial in the amount of power that I need for the circumstance will undoubtedly help me flow more, brake less, and have more fun. I hope this video gave you some new ideas on how to incorporate pumping into your riding. So thanks so much to Darren and Endless Biking for the coaching session. I paid full price for my session, and I would happily take another one with Darren or with any of the other coaches over at Endless in a heartbeat. If you're in the Vancouver area, I highly recommend checking them out. And if you made it this far, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you've got a skill that you've been exploring, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. So get in there, get involved, and we'll see you next time.
We could work on today, and part of what I was trying to show you is I'm not just showing you like, hey, how fast I go, or hey, watch me pump. Is I was trying to hit some different shapes, but also hit them in different spots. So the whole theme is the same, being a little bit taller, pumping, and you saw like really active. It's in pumping lots of things, sometimes
everywhere.
many times, everywhere. When we pump on a downslope, pushing down on a downslope, we're going to get propelled forward. When we press down on an upslope, what happens?
We're presumably going to get propelled upwards.
We're going to get air.
And I actually saw that early on where there's like a little bit of a roller that comes up into the left, and you just sort of like you unweighted so nicely over it and and then pushed out of the corner again.
How
into
did I
it.
do that? Was that on a downhill or was that an uphill?
Oh, it was on an uphill.
It was actually at the bottom. Because what does the bike want to do when I want to push into it?
It wants to bounce back up.
The opposite reaction. So now that bike's coming up, I can literally just absorb that uphill phase of that roller and then get back into putting pressure on the downslope. So whether we're pumping on a downhill to gain momentum, uphill to gain air, or perhaps even in a bottom to help us absorb
Yeah.
We can use this to actually squash jumps. One of the reasons why I like to pump a trail, and I actually got into it from downhill racing, way back in the day, I would actually take my chain off for practice.
Oh, okay.
And what it would do is it would help me identify where I actually had to pedal.
Yeah.
And where I didn't. And I learned quite early that my times weren't necessarily any slower. And in some cases, they were faster without a chain.
Yeah.
And I believe it was because it forced me to really read the terrain. Once you're good, like, you can do whatever you want.
Are you braking and pumping? Are you dragging rear brake and pumping?
Generally, like, I'm going to release
Yeah, okay.
when I start to pump.
Okay.
But they go hand in hand,
Yeah.
right? As in, we're both brakes here, and I'm just going to set or maintain my speed with a really, like, just a super light drag of the rear, just to keep it the same. But as soon as I'm like, oh, I got this, I'm starting to see the opportunities. Now I'm going to get off that brake and just really start to pump it.
So,
That was no brake.
yeah. Is that just unweighting?
Yep.
Yeah. So a little bit of a pre-hop and then just sliding over.
Just playing with the dial.
Yeah.
Lots of pressure, but not lots of lift.
Okay.
Right? So
Yeah.
You'll be able to.
So you're not really you're not lifting the rear wheel up. You're just
I'm just unweighting
letting it unweight. Yeah.
and then just use your hips to whip it around,
Sweet.
and then back on it.
Yeah. So that's literally how you would initiate a Scandi too. Like you just unweight, you kick that rear end out, and then you can cut the next corner. Okay.
Little extra one for
Dude,
you today.
I super appreciate that one.
Yeah.
Tuck that one away.